Hello and welcome back to another lesson in class. This is 54 in continuing education. The title for this is What's the Point of Class Without Emotion? So, what's the point of class without emotion? Well, before we get started, I want to, trigger an emotion, memory, or something for many people. This is not shotgunning because I'm only using essentially two symbols, right, for this first part. So, if you can see here, you have a symbol that kind of looks like, the game Assassin's Creed symbol, whatever. But then right next to it, you also have the Deathly Hallows symbol. And if you were to, get rid of the stick, so on and so forth, and just curve the bottom, cut that out, it'd be very similar, right? Things got added later on. Pretty much if you played the game, you know how Da Vinci fixed the hidden blade so it didn't cut off the ring finger, so on and so forth. Which probably gave birth to the little line in the middle because now you got to keep your finger, or whatever the case. The bottom portion, etc., a way to be hidden in plain sight, so on and so forth. Or if you were to be an artistic person, you can show someone like winking an eye with a similar symbol, right? If you were to draw two eyes, but one has a dilated pupil, or you could see the color, and then of course the other one is closed, that would essentially be what that looks like, yes? Because if you were to even code on a keyboard, you would notice that. And then, of course, Deathly Hallows, if you're a Harry Potter person, why not? And I mean, they are bringing back Black Flag, which was about pirates. So shout out to Pirates of the Caribbean fans out there. So now let's get into this. Why emotion is the piece missing the most, right? So why is it the missing piece to a lot of things, right? So that's the first thing I want you to think about, especially after seeing one of those two symbols, it resonating with you, so on and so forth. Especially the story of each thing, right? They're very similar, right? There's a good side, there's a bad side, there's light, there's dark, etc. So now that we have that first point there, right? Why is emotion the piece that's missing the most from most individuals? Let's go to number two, the puzzle piece tattoo that I mentioned a while back with a hole in the center, right? To me, if I was revealing something, I was revealing possibly the darkness and possible pain within, right? So how would I translate this into stuff that I know so that I can understand it better? If it matches up, for instance, right? So let's say you see something that looks like a puzzle piece or puzzle pieces together in the Windows type of coloring, so primary colors, RBG, or if you're digital, or the red, yellow, and blue if you're an artist, etc. And then there would be like a hole in the middle. Well, Windows and technology have done a lot of things for a lot of individuals, and it got to help assist in the creation of a lot of other things and making it easier after things got built upon, right? A lot of things got replicated, but things got built upon it, right? Because then of course you have Apple, etc. Apple's not Windows because you have Linux, and then you have other operating systems, etc. But what's the missing piece, right? Is it price? Is it is it beauty? What is it, right? So why emotion? Well, emotion is the thing that is most misunderstood on both sides, right? Oh, I feel like you hear me, but you're not listening to me, right? Or you hear me or you don't understand. Or hey, why aren't you looking at me? I'm talking to you, right? Some people, they've taken information differently. Other people have a hard time reading that, right? Or accepting that, right? Because they think when they have their eyes locked in with yours, it could establish some other thing, but there's ways to get not only around it, but dispel people from understanding that at a psychological point of view, right? Because let's say, for instance, my background, I was in the military, I'm cleaning a rifle. If I'm cleaning a rifle and all I have to do is listen to instruction that has nothing to do with whatever I'm doing, right? No instruction giving me instruction on working with my rifle, so on and so forth, etc., and cleaning it, right? This is during boot camp. And all I have to do is listen, then that would be the instruction, right? I don't need my eyes and my ears paying attention to you at the same time. Does that make sense, right? So then why emotion? Well, were you trying to understand, or are you just trying to, are you looking for knowledge, or are you looking for wisdom? Because I could give you a short answer and now you have information. Once that information gets confirmed, so on and so forth, blah, 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 it turns into knowledge, right? But in order to have a wisdom, you need to understand why. Because just like in a business, a courtroom, etc., there's ethics. Morals can be flexible depending on the circumstances, but that also weighs in upon judgment if there's ever a judge presiding over anything. So when it comes to myself hearing people talk about certain things and they get emotional over this side, that side, or this person, we should have just brought this person back, etc., I'm just like, why do you think there's only a handful of people going up for the job? Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. I mean, do they have a great story behind them? Sometimes it's extremely inspiring. But without understanding everything, then things are going to be hidden in plain sight and you're not even going to know it. What do I mean by this? There was a podcast on the Diary of a CEO, and people thought I was, cracking jokes and stuff, but I was loosely being sarcastic based upon my understanding. And they put a map up of the whole world. And the professor that was on there, readily popular, goes and he points out America. And he goes, America is not just this, it's all of this. And he highlights and it puts his hand over Canada, North America, Central America, South America, etc. And that is where the tariffs and certain things come into place, right? So when I would joke with people, I'm like, oh, so have you heard of NCIS, right? Like North, and because people would say, oh, I'm American. That's great. Are you from North America, Central America, South America? Which one is it? Because it's all America. Now, did that trigger something? If so, you have to ask yourself, one, why? Was it based on the little amount of knowledge and information that you have consumed and been led to believe because it doesn't personally affect you until it does? Or do you just not want to understand, so you just go with whatever you're told, right? Without exploration, which leads to seek and thou shalt find, I guess, right? Now, if that little quote triggered something, well, why did that trigger something there in a positive or negative way? But when I showed the two symbols in the beginning, it was mostly positive. Did you ever ask yourself that question? Why was it positive when you saw the Harry Potter symbol? Why was it positive when you saw the video game symbol, etc.? Did you actually play the video game, one, or watch the movie, two, and or understand everything within, right? Because Assassin's Creed is based on knowledge, wisdom, etc., and they talk about the Apple of Eden, etc. And then the Deathly Hallows, the teachers and the professors are majority, and the principal, Dumbledore, the headmaster, which is another word, right? Was also, they're all pretty badass. Why is that? Why wasn't it highlighted some muscle bound? Was it because they had magic there at their disposal? Or was it because of other things? Because if it was based upon age, well then, as Darren Brown would say, the pensioners would be the badasses, right? Because they collect the pension, etc., right? Or whatever, savings, etc. I don't even think they do pensions anymore. But if all those words and terms struck a chord with you, not to make a reference to Pirates of the Caribbean earlier, to strike an accord, or a reference to a Honda Accord, but to strike a chord like a musical chord that affects your nervous system, are you starting to see how not only the puzzle pieces come together, but how certain things not only get their names, but build upon everything else. Right? So Windows has the primary colors until we had digital. Then you had RGB, right? And when you were younger, back in the day, you can go real close to a TV. This was before, heavier pixelation was installed and given out publicly. You can zoom in pretty much, even use a magnifying glass, and you would see the RGB colors within the television. And then, of course, with pixelation, it got smaller and smaller until it looked pretty good. So when it comes to the tattoo, I see that also as, you ever seen the anime Bleach? The hollows, they have like a hole in their chest. Ichigo's mom had one, etc., or take over her, etc. And it was almost like they became extremely negative. And that's what I got from the anime, right? So the hollows, they all of a sudden became extremely negative. They were cruel. They had no heart. All this other stuff, etc. And then, what's interesting about the whole thing is that Ichigo went through all three phases, right? Whereas everybody that was there was already there for quite some time, right? What do I mean by that? Well, you had the Soul Society. They've all been in that position for a while. They normally don't mention them starting off one way and then going to another thing, right? So it was an evolution of an individual that rose up, like Dragon Ball Z, right? The evolution of a Saiyan going through, right? Like, what else? Like a video game, right? The evolution of leveling up in life to not only have more understanding, but to, understand the emotions and how much stuff really doesn't mean much. Even if it's printed on paper, people will do crazy things and then get upset when they reveal their true intentions, right? Whether if that was for something that was digital or tangible that needed the primary or digital colors to even associate what it meant by digital numbers or, physical ones, etc., in the form of something tangible. But why would it be important, right? Don't you think somebody would, take advantage of it? Possibly, right? I mean, think about it. You are young, you're a kid, you're doing origami, and they show you how to make a paper football, right? And it looks like a triangle, right? So you do the origami and it looks like a thing. But if you go to Quick Trip, right, they have the folds of honor, and the full flag, United States flag, is folded the same way. And normally that's what you get when you retire or you retire from the military. So it's pretty interesting to see that, if you can make that connection. Most people don't, because most people don't, I don't know. I guess they don't connect everything together, right? How does a Folds of Honor flag resemble a origami football? Well, first you would have to understand what I'm referring to when I'm talking about playing the game football. It's where you do the little paper, you line it up like a triangle, you put it between your fingers, and you flick it, and the other person's on the other side like this, and they're trying to kick it through or flick it through the goalpost. But if you don't associate that to other things around it, then you would not understand also diversification. That would be a financial term, right? But diversification, and most people are saying, what does this have to do? Is he rambling? Has everything to do with a puzzle, because all the pieces are diversified into their own different shape, their own different way, and they fit together in a specific way, right? Not all the pieces are going to go together, such as a lot of things in life. And if you don't understand that, well, you're not going to understand a lot of other things, and you're going to get frustrated very quickly, right? So, I mean, think about it. Why emotion is the biggest piece. One, because people either were told to be afraid of feeling a certain way, so they go in search of that feeling somewhere else, whether that's in, whatever. This is a body armor bottle with actual water in it. But whatever, right? They're in search of a feeling until they get that attachment to something that is better than the feeling that they had before, right? But what is the feeling, right? Is it to feel down because they fell into a pattern and that pattern became comfortable? Is it to feel happy or extremely excited? because they fell into a pattern and became extremely comfortable, and then that pattern got disrupted, so they had to level out, and then they question why they ended up back there, not understanding that they just went back to what was comfortable, which is the path of normally least resistance. Right? So people get upset, they get emotional, but they never question the emotions, right? Which is normally why it's missing. It doesn't get questioned by others. It normally gets made fun of, depending on wherever you are, and vice versa, right? So it either gets made fun of or it gets pointed at in a negative way. So then you just grow what? Hollow inside? That doesn't make sense, does it? Point 3. Order of translation and the beauty of the inner child. So what does this mean? The beauty of the inner child. Everybody has experienced Christmas to a certain point or present to a certain point where just before you don't actually know, if you obviously ever experienced this, right? You didn't know something was in a box, you open up the box, etc., and something was in the box. And whatever was in the box made you extremely happy, excited, and it was something that you wanted, and you had to wait this whole time for that one thing at that one day, at that particular time, etc., or period. Which is not only a psychological thing, but it's very similar to the marshmallow test, right? If you're able to wait this long for something, then you would get more later. But if you need something right now, then you will get a lot less. Similar to investing, right? You can wait after your investment. You see it skyrocket, you see it do all these things, or you could be strategic, see it skyrocket, make sure you break even, then let the rest ride. There you go, long term, and then worry about everything and get a lot more later, making small donations monthly, and then of course that's compound interest and everything snowballs. But it's the order of the translation, right? I started off with one thing, then I jumped to another topic that others listening or that might resonate with when it comes to a different space within their memory of, well, whatever it is that they do or that they enjoy doing. If you're in IT and you enjoy IT, if I mention that terminology, it might tickle the brain. If I talk about finance and you like finance, etc. Right? And that's how you also get people's emotions and their attention for them to tune in, right? And this is also how you start to develop a way to, well, turn a negative into a positive. So let's go into the beauty of the inner child real quick. And just to recap, I talked about Christmas. You get the thing that you want, it makes you, etc. And it gives the other person a feeling. It's the transference of positive energy for that moment. Something I enjoy, especially that's why I got into magic and doing a couple other things. Point number 4, right? The hardened heart with a chess-like mindset leads to pure logic and science without creativity and art. So what does this mean? Well, in certain places they'll say, oh, well, this can never create, it can just replicate, etc. And essentially that's what logic and science are, right? Logic makes sense of it so that everybody can do it, and it makes it easy for everybody to understand, similar to writing and grammar a certain way. Whereas science wants to test a hypothesis to see if it's able to be replicated over and over again within experimentation amongst a variety of group of people within the community, right? So if you're a scientist and you wanted to do a small volcano, you can do, baking soda and vinegar and watch it fizzle, right? And then that would be able to be replicated. That's logical in the science community. But in the science community, that's called experimentation, right? Or a science project, right? Are you a science project? Do you like all the pills that you're popping that are prescribed to you, or the ones that you purchase? Because I'm sure if I keep going, I will find something. Do you purchase it with something tangible or something digital, made out of plastic? that comes from fossil fuels. Did any of those things trigger you just now? What color was the puzzle piece? Windows, right? Primary colors, right? Where did those come from? That comes from creativity and art. And you learn that when you're a kid. Hence why class is not only an acronym, but is understood everywhere that there is, well, an institution that teaches education, if you want to use that terminology to talk about, well, putting words or symbols on paper and then understanding and interpreting it correctly. Creativity and art lead the venture, and then of course logic and science back it for the solidified investment for the long-term strategy to exit later on for more capital and a higher ROI because of the LTV. If you understood that terminology, you're probably a business person or heard of it somewhere. But let's continue to the next point. Learning to control one's emotions or turn them off is useful, especially if someone uses technology and others to trigger certain emotions and things within you. This creates an entrapment blackmail situation. Someone can entice you to do something or to act a certain way by behaving themselves a certain way, right? If they understand that you're recording and someone is being a heckler, you can either call out the heckler, right, and make fun of them, or utilize taboo language, curse, etc., if that area deems for it, and or you can see that they're projecting more than they would if they were sitting inside of a car, right? So if that be the case, then you can understand the dynamics of verbal combat, right? And the way speech and debate and the way attorneys and lawyers and the way marketers go back and forth, right? Because convincing the finance department is easy. They just want to see a good fight, right? And they want to win an ROI on whatever they trust the investment to, right? Because that's essentially what marketing is. So remember that, right? Because it's psychology, similar to the blackmail entrapment situation. If I want you to purchase something, I'm going to say what sounds good to your ear or try to say something to you to trigger you to cause an action, right? What is the call to action? Hey, dummy, did I get your attention? Hey, for $19.99, you could go ahead and purchase this. All you got to do is dial 1-888-88 blah 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 blah, right? So, I mean, you have to be able to look at things a different way, right? Similar to, you don't know what's in the box, but you know on this day, during this time, during this holiday, whatever, or celebration, there's something that's going to be in a box or an envelope that I might get. Not many, but a lot do, that you might get, what's it called, and something that you want is inside of it, right? But you have to wait, right? Similar to the marshmallow test. But thing is patience a virtue in that fashion then, if you want everything immediately? If you had all the answers already, would the game still be interesting? How many of you have played a video game to call and round robin back, right? Put in all the cheat codes, you beat the whole thing. Do you want to continue playing it, or do you want to remove the cheat codes and play it that way? Because now you saw everything, you saw how it played out, like a mouse in a maze, and they continue to run the simulation over and over again until they can control every variable, because that's what scientists do, but they like to experiment, so they don't know when to stop, right? So they keep abusing that power, right? And power back in the day could be categorized as, well, magic, right? If you want to say as such, or a flex in different terminology. And so it just really depends on how they want to utilize their brevity, their gravitas, whatever it is that makes them strong, that they're leveraging, right? If they knew something about you and they could get you to act a certain way, because, oh, every time he gets upset, he starts acting this way. You want to laugh? Go ahead and keep saying this shit around him. Watch how fast he fucking reacts. and then of course you react that way, etc. Right? It's very logical because it can be repeated over and over again. If you study magic, or if you study con artistry, or you watch some of those shows, you will see a repetitive pattern over and over again that actually plays out in the real world, right? Because in these situations, when people want to, well, trigger them or to do certain things because they're not the brightest group in the world, but they're still a group, right? Then they'll keep doing it over and over again, right? Until something interrupts the pattern, similar to what I stated before. Right? So let's move forward. I think we're 25 minutes in. Let's do a mic check real quick. We're still good? All right. So if someone wishes to exhaust resources and energy to disturb your peace and finances, take it as a compliment that you're going in the right direction and people do not want you to do a lot of stuff. You could definitely take my advice on that, right? If somebody wants what you have, if they want to disturb your peace, your money, time, and freedom, liberty, etc., then, well, think about it. I mean, really think about it. You should take it as a compliment because they're telling you something, right? A doctor doesn't keep pushing in places that it doesn't hurt or you don't make a sound or a vocalization. It's like, do you feel this? Yeah. Do you feel this? Yes. Do you see blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, you're like, ow, that hurt. And it's like, why does that hurt? And then, of course, there's different words that can label pain that will inform a doctor on what it might be when it comes to diagnostics, if I remember. There's at least, I think, 10 or 15 different words, right? Is it dull? Is it sharp? What does it feel like? Is it tingly every time? That's why they shotgun and do stuff like that, but it's a way to decipher and diagnose quickly. But if they don't want you to go down that path, either because they're upset because you didn't take the same route as everybody else, so you disturbed the pattern, then that's pretty interesting, and they sound jealous. And I don't mean to say that in a sarcastic way. Okay, kind of. However, if they understood and did the same things you did to be able to do that, then they would have better understanding, but they just acquired knowledge without the understanding. And then when they get to put that to the test and it's successful, and now they gain wisdom, and that plays off again, and through them, you have intuition, now they have wisdom, and the people that they taught, etc., that got obtained the information now have knowledge, right? And that's that 3-step process, right? Pretty interesting when you slow it or break it down in a couple ways. But we're wrapping up here. We have 6 more points to go. So if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments, and then we'll go from there one by one. Remember, this is a philosophical lecture, so I'm pretty sure that there's going to be questions, because philosophy is something that is, well, a collaboration of not only rhetoric, but the way and speech patterns work together, such as poetry, with scientific backing or wording behind it within or wrapped in storytelling, right? There are metaphors, right? Then there are analogies. To understand philosophy, you would have to understand not only both, but you would also have to understand what's an entendre, right? So if I was talking about the tattoo, there's a handful of people that know this. And then, of course, obviously it's a deck of, well, playing cards. And there was somebody that is still like a mentor to me, even though we haven't hung out in a while. He was a mentor back in the day. Then I have certain things, similar to, right? And what's interesting is that we have very similar thresholds before we start to explode and start tearing into people verbally. And I think one person said that I almost sounded like DMX, etc., which is funny because this is it's a deck of playing cards from the Tricks convention. Like when I said I used to do magic, I'm not even kidding. Super nerd and geek. So if you got offended by whatever this card box was, or whatever I stated, did you understand those emotions? Ask yourself why, so on and so forth. Now, why do I say so on and so forth? Well, because they were using weave in another TV show, Diary of something, and they said, oh, she's a natural weaver. However, for some reason, like Demolition Man, I know how to sew. So I say so on and so forth, etc. Right? If you were a magician, you would know about abracadabra. Right? I will create with what I speak, or something like that. Other ways to translate it, if that's how it's defined after it's being translated into a different language and told to somebody else. Think about it. If you cannot turn off emotions and let go quickly, you will fall prey, as prey does, to the informed others already have. So what does this mean, right? So if you cannot turn off your emotions and let go very quickly of people, individuals, situations, etc., unless you're financially or physically restrained there, you should be able to leave. However, if you do not, then you will fall prey, as the prey does, right? What do I mean by this? There was obviously, so I think it's okay to talk about this. It's for educational purposes anyways. But during the COVID situation, there were, I think if I remember correctly, businesses that were informed to, well, tell certain individuals who didn't get a vaccination, and they would pay them anywhere between, I think it was like 150 or $100 to $200 per person that they snitched on. So they fell prey, right? Because the person that you once trusted preyed upon you. Now you were forced to get a vaccination. The other individual was preyed upon financially, right? They took a hold of that. But now they can't go backwards, because their leverage now, the person who paid them, would be to tell the other people that probably outnumber that single individual. And if that were to occur, well, that would quickly switch up the numbers. Think about it. So, how do I say this? So, they think they could use that with power to create a fearful slave, pretty much, right? Oh, you shouldn't say that. Oh, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do this. Where does it state that? That's what I normally ask, right? Where does it state that? Where's the book? Can I go to the library? Can I read it somewhere so that I have a better understanding before I literally sit here and believe anything you have to say? Where's the book? Where's the subsection? Where is it in the U.S. code? How about that? Unless we could talk about 18 all day, but you're not a criminal, right? So then that has nothing to pertain with you. You're not violating telecommunications, which is 47, right? Underneath the U.S. Code 47, everything dealing with telecommunications. Google it. Now, if you don't believe in the code to reference, well, Pirates of the Caribbean, well, then you don't respect it. And if you don't respect what's on paper, but you'll sell people out to make something that's printed on paper, then what are you really about? And what's it backed by? Is it backed by words? Something tangible? Digital? What is it? See, it's different in the military because, as I stated earlier, they dispel you, right? They break it down Barney style. They make it real easy to understand, right? And they show you the tricks so that you can connect things a lot quicker, right? Because if they switch it into simpler vocabulary, because sometimes people are lazy or they need guidance, not instruction. That's why I say Google it. If they're interested, they'll Google it, right? Instruction is, you're going to Google this now after hearing this word, right? So it's very interesting how that plays out, but you understand what the command is, right? What the spell is and how it instructs you to do something, right? Because after you get dispelled, you get taught to, well, like the movie Roadhouse, that's what it was called, right? Something similar, right? You play dumb until it's time to no longer play dumb. Do you know how to spell dumb? And if you do, why is the B silent? You must be French, because do and do One's DU and one's DUX, but the X is silent. Why is that? I don't know. Phonetics, telecommunications, hooked on phonics. Now it's hooked on phonics. Everybody texting. What are you scared of? Why are you doing that? Right? If I were to tell you that this is worth just as much as this, then how does the song go by Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock? It takes two to make a thing go right. I don't see two, but Pitbull says he saw it takes three to tango or something like that, right? Now, if those words triggered you, why did they? If all those symbols or signs or paper triggered you, right? That's a playing card. It's on paper. This is a dollar bill. It's on paper. They both have ink on it with images. One has a different design on the back. The other one has a different design on the back. What you get upset about? What you focused on? You see how quick you could tap into someone's psychology once you understand a little bit? Let's keep going. People only know what they are told. So what is a relationship, right? How does it affect the body, mind, and spirit in a positive or negative way? Well, relationship, if you break it up, I look at it as, well, two having something in common on a ship, right? So if we were on a ship, right? I'm a former Marine. We're a product of the Navy or a department of the Navy who have ships, right? So I'm going to relate this to my terminology. If I had a bunkmate or a roommate, that would be the person I'm in a relationship with, male or female. Doesn't really matter, but I have something in common with them. We're both in service. That's one thing, right? They say opposites attract. Over time, you got to give it time, right? Because something got you two to speak, right? And of course, time tells all, literally. And then, of course, when they get deployed, they go out for a certain amount of time, right? And they're stuck together for a certain amount of time. Or when you're stateside and you're in the barracks and you're still sharing a room, you are together for a certain amount of time. It doesn't really matter, right? You get married or you're dating somebody, you start living with them, you're together for a certain amount of time before you realize if you could tolerate it or not, or you make a request, or you break up, or you do something else. Not that difficult. However, what is difficult is the emotional aspect that happens afterwards, right? That negative feeling of loss, even though you try to say you did not lose something, right? You lost a moment in time that maintained a pattern within your life that kept you fucking stable. And then that just went out the window, along with all the other emotions that went along with it and certain things, right? So you become emotional. But because you never handled those or you never spoke about them, you never revealed them, you stayed in the closet, whatever the fucking case is, excuse my language, etc., it's going to affect you a certain way, right? You break up, you drink, it affects the body and the mind if you get a hangover. Or you don't understand the breakup, right? High school sweethearts, and then all of a sudden you're gone, right? Etc. And now you have to figure everything out. It forces you to question a lot of other things that you were told in life. Did Disney tell me the truth and they live happily ever after, or did Disney lie, right? But if you don't read enough books, if you don't see enough things, right? This is a different deck of playing cards, right? These are the Guardians, right? Pretty cool deck. This is the what is it? I forgot, the Artifice casing that came from Illusionist. I don't get paid for this, obviously, but as you can see, it's a deck of playing cards. You got the Ace of Spades right here. That's pretty cool there. You can turn it upside down, right? And then, of course, you got this cool, like, I think I have a cousin that has this tattoo on the back of it, which is pretty dope, right? And it's something that was pretty interesting. I kept it for quite some time. And then only later on did it come out, and somebody was like, "Hey, people that are part of Space Force are called Guardians." I was like, "That is fucking hilarious." Um, so to me, that was interesting. I was like, ugh. In the Marines, we say Semper Fi. If you want to, copy others, right? First letter, second letter, in each word, right? SF, Semper Fi, Space Force, part of the Air Force, which normally has a big budget. Marines, part of the Navy, which normally has a big budget. Uh, Star Trek was based on the Navy, the USS Enterprise, product of the Navy. Navigation through the stars, product of the Navy, through history and time, if you believe that. Longitude, latitude, etc. So many things. And so, you start to piece that together. You're like, man, this is really interesting. Now, here's an interesting question I want to ask you. If you were pretty controlled to this point, meaning you didn't get triggered, say, I don't know, I don't want to listen to this no more, whatever the case may be, does an emotion of a split between a best friend, family member, or individual stranger that you develop something with? Well, the reason why it normally hurts when you leave somebody that was a complete stranger that you didn't grow up around, because they're not family, it's different, right? And the emotions are different, the situations are different. But 9 times out of 10, when we're talking about either a romantic relationship or a actual hardcore best friend relationship, is because you chose to invest time in something that was unknown to you. And you chose to invest time in something that not only was unknown to you, but that you went as far as understanding, not obtaining knowledge, right? And then it got comfortable because you were able to then play this game in your mind, right? Oh, I know when they do this, that means this. I know when they do this, that means this. Or, you get to fight, and then you figure each other out and you gain understanding, right? When that's gone, you're like, oh my God, I have to find that thing again. But what was it? Was it something tangible, or was it something intangible that was energetic, that resided inside you? Because if it is, well, then that's an emotion, and you have to identify it as such. And then you could seek it faster, if that makes sense, because you can make the connections faster. What is this feeling, right? Now, if you are into psychology and sociology, they would study this within not only social dynamics, but they would also see this in different behavioral patterns within the psychological and sociological study of individuals and societies and groups between the two. Sociology, social media, right? Psychology, sci-fi, etc. Simplify, right? Simplify, etc. Break it down Barney style. Simplify. At least it sounds that way phonetically. The actual saying is Semper Fidelis. Simplify does sound like simplified, but if you Barney it up, or Bluey it up now, I guess Barney's a little old, showing a lot of people's ages here. Bluey's new. Bluey it up. So let's keep going, right? So how does it affect the body, mind, and spirit? Does it, right? When I say spirit, your psychology could be fine, your body could be okay, but something is wrong energetically. Other cultures will use the term or phrase spirit to describe energy, right? If there was alcohol in this, and this was in a glass bottle with a label, whatever, and it said something, they would call it a spirit, right? So does that change your state, which Tony Robbins can identify? Does it change the energetic pattern in which you are used to, because it disrupted it? And because it's negative, you're depressed, right? Like depressing a button, right? Taking your finger off the button to depress, right? To press it means to push in, right? To depress means to let go, right? Then you have the positive emotion and that pattern. The thing is, there was the negative side, which fed one thing, but it was anticipatory, right? Because you got to spend time, you got to understand, so it was anticipated, right? I'm not going to do this because I'm going to get yelled at. I'm not going to do this because he's going to say this. I'm not going to do this because she's going to say that. Or I'm not going to wear this because it doesn't match so and so, right? Whatever the case may be, right? But it's because it's either affecting your mind, body, or spirit, and it's changing the inputs and outputs that you're receiving, right? On Christmas, if you opened up the gift and nothing was there, or on your birthday, whatever, you opened up the box and what you wanted was not in the box, but everything was led up to believe that it was going to be in the box, and that day it would affect you negatively, not positively, right? And your emotional state and everything would, be distraught. In other words, in social media, they say emotional damage, right? So emotions require psychology and sociology, plus technology sometimes, depending on the objective, right? So, depending on the objective, what is the objective? Is it to do a magic trick? Well, then you're probably going to need psychology, sociology, technology, and a couple other things, right? And then you're going to need the know how plus the understanding. Without the understanding and just knowledge, you have intelligence. With the intelligence applied, repeated over and over again, well, you no longer have intelligence, you have a case study, right? We have information, we have analytics, we have data that says this. Okay, but is it repeatable? How many times did it get repeated? Etc. Is it replicatable? This is your logic and science versus creativity and art. Intelligence can be creative and artistic, which is why when you see the movie 007 and all these other ones, they got the fancy technology. It's very creative, it's very artistic, yada yada. But if you were to see literally or read a book on how they used to pass messages back in the day, it's very using different vocabulary, rudimentary, it's very simple, it's very basic, and it would fly by like you would not believe. However, most people won't understand it because they were trained as the movies showed them. And if they were to see something like that, one, they would freak the hell out. Or if they were already exposed to it because they saw it once or twice. Remember, if you spend time watching a lot of movies of your favorite actor, then you meet your favorite actor in person. This is why people normally get this result. Psychology would dictate, even from a sociological perspective, that your brain can't tell the difference from the time that you watch something with someone and the time you actually spend time with them in person. So when you meet them in person, this is why it's important not to fake the front, right, for the media and the press, is because there's going to be a disconnect when people meet you in person versus what they see on television or anywhere else, right? You don't have to be philosophical to understand that. It's a psychological perspective, right? And it plays out in society sociologically because you could see it with movie actors and the result that they get when people show up to certain events and all their fans are there, right? And then of course, I mean, look at your iPhone, look at your Android, look at your whatever, right? Whatever you're using, right? It takes something to, well, impact you in a certain way. Is it because of the way it looks? Is it because of the way it performs? Is it the way because it speaks? And I say it because I don't know what it is. I like to go driving, so I enjoy my car, but I hope that puppy's not that expensive. I used to have an Audi. Found out after a couple repair jobs after warranty that puppy gets real expensive, and on a military budget it is not the easiest thing to take care of. So moved on to a different thing that was very similar to it that I eventually paid off, and that I had to get into something else because that one ended up dying after taking it to Christian Brothers mechanics over here. Anyways, I digress. Let's continue. Right? It was one of those things that I enjoyed the driving aspect, but I also enjoyed the gas mileage per gallon. I also enjoyed other features that it had because it fed into my persona, right? Having the sport button reminds me of Men in Black, where he's like, don't push the red button, then he pushes the red button, and they take off, right? And then, of course, you watch Fast and the Furious, and they have the NOS button, and it's a red button, and they push it, and that thing takes off. So things like that. That would be like the sport button in the car, right? It goes out of economy mode, it goes into sport, and now you're flying, and all of a sudden your car makes all these adjustments, right? I think the Mercedes-Benz S500 has this where it actually lowers because it has airbags, and it literally lowers and it recalibrates the engine and adds horsepower and torque to the vehicle, and it performs differently. I think the Audi A8 also has that feature. My car does not. However, let's continue. Last 3 points. Let's see here. Sorry, last 2 points, right? 1, 2, 3. Oh no, that's a point. I'm just outlining something. So, if you believe in anything, then you know it does not. What in the world do I have here? Oh, this is a trigger statement. Okay. Trigger statement. I gotta prompt people sometimes because I move too quickly. Trigger statement like crazy. If you believe in anything, then you know it does not. Period. Let's just stay right there for a second. So if you were to break something apart, right? And this is going to be a trigger statement. I'm putting this out there, right? This is from a philosophical point of view because philosophy normally breaks a lot of things down that makes you go, oh, that's what that is. Yeah, right? It's like, oh, Newton, and I'll break it down just like this, right? Philosophy. Here's a story wrapped in an entendre, wrapped in so much other stuff, but it made you believe it because part of it was factual. The Apple logo was when Newton got hit on the head with an apple and discovered gravity, allegedly. But then who took a bite out of the apple? Now look at the logo of the Apple phone. Think about it. If the apple fell off a tree and hit Newton in the head, there was never a bite that looked like that or whatever that took a bite out of it first, then hit him in the head. It came off the tree, right? Unless it was not as descriptive as it needed to be, right? Did a bird, did something else affect the apple, which then released it from the stem? We would have to look that up. But then if we were to break that whole thing down, how did certain events occur? Was it technology? Was it people? Was it psychology, sociology, etc.? If I were to break things up further, right? How do I say this? Right, but I put it in a way that you can't see it, right? The Volkswagen logo, right? It's a VW and it has the V on top and then the W at the bottom. But if I were to separate the two, the W in the middle, leaving the V where it is, it would literally leave one pointing, two peace signs, right? Because it's a W, right? And then of course I would separate it, then you would see that and it would be VVV or 555, something like that, right? Or, right, 5, 5, 5, yeah, 5, 5, 5. But how are you viewing it? That's your creativity and art being well logical and scientific from a psychology standpoint, because creativity and art have to come together when marketing or advertising, and then scientifically putting out there, testing the thing, A/B split test for you marketers and advertisers out there, in order to see if it's effective and replicatable, and then everybody does the similar thing for their own thing, right? It's a process, right? But you have to break it up and understand it. So if I were to say the word Jesus, well, you got to ask yourself, is that in English? Or is that in this language? Or is that in this language? I mean, what was it really? And then, of course, here I wrote down the letter G's, right? G apostrophe S. Or it could be G-E-E-S or G-E-E-Z, right? And then the word us, U-S, right? Us, all of us, right? Geez, us. What do we do now? Right? Oh God, I'm in trouble. What happened? People use things a certain way, but if they only hear it phonetically or auditorily, right? Through their audio system, through the way they interpret sound, right? without having visual understanding or a literal verbal definition given to them, they can misinterpret what's being said, and that's a gap and an opening as well for something to happen, because emotions happen very quickly. You could go from positive to negative, negative to positive, right? They even have a zone 0 to 100 real quick. I'm pretty sure that's bipolar disorder or something like that, right? You go from 0 to 100 or from 100 to 0 real quick, right? Now, when it came to explaining the whole portion of belief, did any of it trigger you so that it left you with knowledge but not understanding, because the negative emotion took over that made you black out? Color code black in psychology, call back to Assassin's Creed Black Flag that they're remaking. But of course, it disrupted your pattern, right? So you blocked out the understanding and the explanation afterwards, which would bring understanding and speed up the process, because you got hung up on emotions. Hence why in business they say check emotions at the door. Don't make emotions personal, right? When it comes to business, right? That's BP, personal, and then you have business. That's the letter B and then P, right? Anyways, do you fight better and harder without attitude and emotion? Well, I would argue that you actually fight better with emotion if you know how to use it, and you, well, can be looked at a certain way by your attitude when fighting, right? Conor McGregor is a perfect example, especially when he was on the rise and he kept winning and talking his smack, so on and so forth, and people met him in person, and they got to not only see different sides, but you got to see the emotion, but then the attitude afterwards and everything else, and how he handled every different situation. Bruce Lee, the same way. On screen, he was one way. When he was actually displaying his martial art, it was a lot different, such as even with other individuals, Michael Jai White. You have other martial artists, Dan Inosanto, right? You have, who was it, Doug Marcaida, and all these different people. But you can see not only on their way up, but you can see how their emotion and attitude change because they're on camera. So, and it's recorded over a duration of time. So you're able to study and research the attitude and the emotions of how they're being reflected while presenting. And then if you ever get the chance to, like I got the chance to go to the 10X Growth Con and one of the Tony Robbins events, and then see them in person, those are two different individuals, right? There's a stage presence when in front of physical people, right? Your red, yellow, blue primary colors, something tangible, and a different, slightly different presence, but it's very closely connected, so they're loved by many because there's not that much of a disconnect. But on the digital side, RBG, there is a different, or a need to know persona, right? So the need to know persona is on social media because that's what they need you to know about them, so you could treat them a certain way, because that's the feeling that they're chasing, the emotion and the position that they're trying to go after. On the opposite side, you get closer into their personal space. In the digital world, not so much. In the physical world, you can touch them, right? And psychology could teach you that people have a personal space, a intimate space, friend space, etc., and that ranges from, I think it's like 1 foot in front of you to 3 to 6 feet, etc. So ask yourself all these questions. Ask yourself about things that I've stated in the past, right? When it comes to, well, emotions and how those affect things, like when I mentioned 300 and Rise of an Empire and how Spartans were trained and things like that, or remember parts of the movie. Remember the last part where I talked about attitude, right? If you watch Karate Kid with Jaden Smith, one of the things Mr. Han says is attitude. You forgot attitude, right? That's like he teaches him how to make a face after he does a thing. And then, of course, the other person could be like, fix your face. And then you'd be like, boom, and you make another face. And it just gets them upset, and it gets them emotional, right? Excuse me, that was a slip there. Think of the emotions and the reasoning behind certain things, like the movie Sidekicks, right? Where there was a kid with asthma and his hero was Chuck Norris and all this other stuff. And he, had this imaginary world with the movie world and himself, and then this woman's uncle who became his martial arts instructor, right? Showed him how to use nunchucks, ironically. And then, of course, last but not least, Assassin's Creed and the Harry Potter logos that I showed you in the beginning, right? Do those trigger an emotion? Can you see how the triangle and the partial curved line, the curved line could be part of a circle? The triangle could be one way, and there's something in the middle that it's seen or not seen. But at the end of the day, you want to remember that was the 12th point in lesson 54. 55 is coming. And if I remember how to do this, what's 12 plus 54? What does that add up to? I think it's 66. And I think we spoke about a lot of things in there. Did that trigger you? I don't know. But till next time, everybody, have a good one. Peace.